Hello everyone and welcome to the channel. I'm Emmanuel, I'm an Airbus pilot, and in today's video let's have a look at the DATALINK clearance request, or in flight simulation more commonly known as PDC. Now, we gotta start by just saying that the term PDC, or pre-departure clearance, as it is commonly called in flight simulation, is actually incorrect. In the real world this is called a DATALINK clearance, or DCL, versus PDC, how it's called in flight simulation. The wrong term came up when Flight Sim Labs implemented about 10 years ago this system for the first time using the Hoppy network, and back then they basically implemented it according to the standards of one particular airline, and that particular airline just happened to call it differently, but the term stuck with flight simmers, and therefore we find it implemented more or less like this in most aircraft nowadays. Now, before going into the actual system, let's just quickly answer two questions. The first is when to use the electronic clearance request via ACARS compared to when to request clearance by voice, and the second is when and how are we going to transmit the information. Now, let's answer the easy one first. When do we use DATALINK clearance versus clearance via voice? The answer is pretty much at any time possible. The background is that giving a clearance via voice congests the frequency for at least some 30 seconds per clearance, and therefore it means air traffic control is going to get a lot busier, and in some cases, when some aircraft are running short of catching their slot or stuff like that, it might just be easier if they have the possibility to request their clearance straight away. Now, let's now talk about the question when to submit the clearance request. And the answer is, in the real world, we normally do it just before we get ready for pushback, so that you get the latest possible clearance and not any amendments to it at a later point. Let's say you get the most current slot, you get the current sit. Remember, sits can change based on the time of the day, so we just want to be sure that we get the latest possible data. On VATSIM, I tend to do things a little bit different, because on VATSIM you often get slots allocated not via the scheduled departure time on your flight plan, which is how it works in the real world, but based upon when you request your ATC clearance. So therefore, on VATSIM I tend to get them in as early as possible, and if I know that I'm at a slot-regulated airport, I would submit my TOBT or my EOBT, to be more precise, via the DATALINK clearance as well. So now that we have all of this out of the way, let's go ahead and have a look into how to request the clearance. We find the menu under the MCDU menu, Air Traffic Service Unit, AOC menu, ATC request, and then pre-departure clearance. And this is the basic menu. It looks similar on most aircraft. The information required is usually the same: ATIS ID, which station do you want to send it to, what's your call sign, what's your aircraft equipment, and at which gate are you located. So this is the basic information that we need to come up with. And then you've got a free text menu down there. Now, let's go ahead and prepare this PDC request and send it away to air traffic control, and then we are going to have a look at how to deal with the clearance when it arrives. So, let's go for it just now. By the way, the ding-dong you just heard was in the background. That one you can disregard straight away. That's just because I've been writing with the air traffic control in order to make sure that I actually get the most out of creating the video. Let's call it like that. Okay, so now that we have finished chatting with ATC, let's go ahead and send our clearance request. So, gate number. As we can see, we're located at gate 311 here in Munich. So, gate number is going to be 311. Next up, the ATIS ID. And unfortunately, we cannot request an ATIS straight away in the MCDU of the Phoenix, but what we can do is we can go into the EFB, and in here we've got ATIS information. If your airplane is able to request an ATIS, by all means do it, as that is more realistic than getting the ATIS from the electronic flight bag, which is not really how it works in the real world. So we've got information Golf over here, so let's go ahead and submit that here as well, ATIS ID Golf. Then the station is going to be the recipient of the request. In the real world, that's obviously the airport at which you are located, but on VATSIM, sometimes these things change around. Let's say, for example, you've got an air traffic controller that also runs a CBDLC en route. That controller might not be locked on with the airport code, but might be locked on with a different code. So, for example, the station might read something like Echo Delta Whiskey Mike for Bremen radar on the Müritz sector, which is running its CPDLC via that code and not via the airport code, obviously. So this one, you gotta be a little bit careful and just check which ATC is online, and therefore just check where exactly to send the request, because otherwise you're not going to get an answer. Today we do have a ground controller online in Munich, so we are going to send it to station Echo Delta Delta Mike. Finally, you've got optional free text. In there you could enter stuff like your expected off-block time, or, for example, you do what we usually do in the real world and put some sort of a good day or something in. For example, over in Frankfurt, we usually put something like this. But this obviously has regional variations. Okay, so now that we've filled all this information, we can click the send button, and now our request is being transmitted to air traffic control. Depending on the exact ACARS version that you have installed in your airplane, it might also just be transferred up to the DCDU, and then you can only send it from there. That is, for example, how it works in the fly-by-wire Airbus. All of these are realistic implementations of different possible PDC formats of the different ACARS softwares available. And believe me, there are lots of them. Now, what we are going to get when we have sent the information is a message that usually confirms like request received, stand by. Now, the Phoenix unfortunately always gives you this message, but it does not necessarily mean that the actual PDC has been submitted to air traffic control. So in the Phoenix you can kinda disregard that. What usually is going to happen when a PDC request is being submitted to a VATSIM controller is that the VATSIM system is going to send you an automatic response saying more or less request received, stand by, when the clearance request has been received. Now, we have to wait a little bit. Sometimes the VATSIM systems do take a bit of time. The controller might not see your clearance request immediately, he might be busy with something, so it can certainly take a little time until the response is received. And here we got what I'm just talking about, so let's first of all cancel that ATC message, so that we have a bit of time to have a look at what we just received. So we've got flight safety message number 1534 over here on the 3rd of April 2024 from Station Munich. Ocean 3 Yankee, request received, and request being processed, stand by. Alright, so now that this is received, we can just click it away. But we can see already that we have received two different messages here. And if we click the next message button, then we should be led to the next message. Okay, let's close this. And here is our PDC. Now, you can see this contains several different parts of information. And what we would do in the real world is just hit the print button in order to print that off, because you need to send the Wilco reply in a matter of only about 30 seconds in the real world. Now, in the sim, unfortunately, or fortunately I should say, it works a little bit different. So before we answer to the clearance, let's go ahead and have a look at the content of the actual clearance that we have received over here. So we're going to start with the information that's been sent to us. So this is PDC number 2. So this is the second one that the controller has sent in his session. In the real world that can go all the way up to a couple hundreds. On VATSIM usually it's a little bit less. So PDC number 2, Ocean 3 Yankee, cleared to Palma de Mallorca, off runway 26 left, via Turbo 7 Sierra departure, squawk 2305. Now ADT MDI, this basically means that the limiting factor for us is the mean departure interval. In other words, if we had a slot, then here's the reason for it. We don't have a slot today. Now let's go on to the next page, and this says next frequency 121.710, 8 is golf, request startup according to EOBT or CTOT on 121.710. Do note that the PDC might also tell you something like startup approved, contact apron on frequency so-and-so. In this case, startup has not been approved, as you can see. We need to request that according to EOBT or CTOT on the ground frequency. Okay, now that we've read the message and that we agree with it, aka we know that we're able to proceed on this departure, we can send the Wilco message. Note that you also have the ability to send a standby message. In that case, you can reply later because those messages can time out. On VATSIM as well, I believe the limit is 300 seconds, so you've got 5 minutes to deal with this. Or you can send unable. If you're unable to comply with this clearance, then the controller will see in his clearance software that we have rejected the clearance, and then he knows already that we're going to call him on voice. Now, this is basically the PDC we have received. So let's go ahead, press Wilco, and now we see the Wilco, or the will comply, backlighted up here, and now we can press send, and with that we are confirming the clearance we have received. Now, what you can see down here is we are going to get one more reply, which is clearance confirmed from air traffic control. But what you can see over here now is that now that we have sent this off, the entire message turns green. And for that reason, I just delayed sending the response. But basically, this is the very same thing that we had on the previous page. Now that the clearance has been received, we've got to go ahead and cross-check it in our system. So what we do is we go to the flight plan, and now we cross-check. Clear to Palma de Mallorca, which is the destination we have down here. Yes, this check is important because you might have an incorrect flight plan submitted, or you might have gotten a clearance for another flight. So do have a quick look at that. Off runway 26 left, and now we can see we've got Munich runway 26 left via Turbo 7 Sierra departure. Now we look at this, we see Turbo 7 Sierra, and then we say Turbo 7 Sierra confirmed. And only after the SID is confirmed to match our clearance, then we can go ahead squawk 2305, and then we can go ahead and actually enter that squawk, so 2305. So, next frequency, 121.710, so now we can go ahead, dial that frequency in, and with that our clearance is now completely worked through. You can see over here already that we have just received another message. This is interesting, this is a bug. Using the next message field you should be able to go there without closing the current one, but okay, so be it. Interestingly enough, with the previous message, we can do that in the Phoenix, but as mentioned, it should be in the next message. Anyway, we have just received clearance confirmed from air traffic control, so this basically closes the communication loop. We have received the clearance, we set a Wilco, but they just say one more time, clearance confirmed. And with that, we can now hit close, and now we have received our entire clearance. Okay, so we can close this, and now we're done with it. Now, in case you need to call this up again, there is obviously a recall button down here, but this may only be able to bring back the last message you closed. So in case the clearance confirmed message was the last one you closed, you would only get that. But how can you find your clearance still? Well, you can always go into the ATC COM, go on the message record, and in here you have your entire PDC. So in here you can immediately see, like, okay, here's our PDC. If you need to bring it up again, in here you can find it. Alright, and that basically concludes our lesson on pre-departure clearance / data link clearance, and how to request one correctly, and how to handle it when you have received it. In the real world, we would have printed the message. Unfortunately, the Phoenix does at this point not support this, but other add-ons might. So if you're flying one that does support printing the message, please do so, as you need to have a copy of your clearance constantly available. Alright, this confirms and concludes today's video. I do hope that you liked it, and if you did, be sure to let me know in the comments below. At this point, I would also like to thank Maximilian on the Munich ground right now for helping me out on this video by providing the ATC part of our flight. And with that, I'd like to say thank you very much for watching, everyone. Hope that you have enjoyed the video. If you did, be sure to leave a like, comment, and subscribe if you're up for more. And if you really love what I'm doing, I would appreciate a small donation through the Buy Me a Coffee link in the video description below. Until then, thank you for watching, and I see you all again on the next one.